Part 1. The Cosmic Technology Commission had watched civilizations rise and fall for 11,000 standard cycles. From their vast archive station orbiting a dying red star, they collected data on every spacefaring species in the known galaxy. Their purpose was simple. They studied how civilizations grew. They recorded how technology developed. They looked for patterns that could predict what any species might achieve. Commissioner Al had served the commission for 300 cycles. Their body was made of living crystal, and different colors moved through their form depending on their thoughts. Blue meant curiosity, green meant understanding, red meant confusion. For the past several days, Al had been glowing a deep and troubled red. The problem was the human data. Al sat in their observation chamber, surrounded by floating displays that showed charts and graphs and endless streams of information. Every other species in the database followed predictable paths. Young civilizations developed basic tools. Then they created schools and academies. Professional classes emerged. Scientists studied science. Engineers studied engineering. Doctors studied medicine. Each field became its own closed world, protected by credentials and certifications and years of formal training. This was how progress happened. Everyone knew this. The Commission had proven it across thousands of civilizations over 11. Innovation came from experts working within established institutions. Breakthroughs emerged from well-funded laboratories staffed by highly trained specialists. This was the natural order of technological development. The humans broke every rule. Al pulled up another anomaly report and felt their crystal structure flicker with frustration. A major breakthrough in spacecraft propulsion had been credited to something called the Backyard Rocket Collective. The Commission's translation systems explained that a backyard was a small plot of land behind a human dwelling, typically used for growing decorative plants or recreation. Somehow, a group of enthusiasts meeting in these backyards had solved a fuel efficiency problem that 3 major aerospace corporations had declared impossible. The commissioner moved to the next report. A revolutionary water purification membrane, now used on half the colony ships leaving Earth, had been invented by a cargo transport operator. The woman had no scientific training. She had no laboratory. She had grown frustrated with the taste of recycled water on her ship and decided to fix the problem herself. 3 years later, her design was standard equipment across human space. Al's form pulsed with confused crimson light. This made no sense. How could an untrained individual solve a problem that professional chemists had studied for decades? The Commission's models did not account for this. Their predictive algorithms kept returning errors when fed human data. The anomalies continued. A teenager with no formal education had written software that now protected critical infrastructure across Earth and its colonies. A retired teacher had developed a new form of solar collection by accident while working on an unrelated hobby project. A musician had revolutionized medical imaging by noticing similarities between sound wave patterns and cellular structures. None of these people were supposed to be capable of these achievements. They lacked the proper training. They had not studied in the appropriate academies. They did not have access to professional-grade equipment or institutional funding. Yet somehow, impossibly, they kept solving problems that their own experts could not. Al sent an urgent request to the Commission's review board. This anomaly required direct investigation. They needed to send someone to observe humans in their natural environment. 2 cycles later, senior analysts received their assignment. Was a mantid form researcher, their body segmented and precise, with compound eyes that could track dozens of data streams simultaneously. They had spent their career untangling contradictions in development. The paradox, the crystalline divergence, the mystery of the silent builders had solved them all. Now they faced their greatest challenge: understand the humans. Traveled to Sol system aboard a Commission research vessel. Earth hung before them, blue and green and swirling with white clouds. Orbital stations circled the planet like metal moons. Ships of countless designs moved between stations, carrying cargo and passengers across the solar system. The analysts began their observations from Station Harmony, a massive structure that served as humanity's primary spaceport. They watched humans for several days before approaching any of them. The creatures were strange to look at. Soft bodies, limited sensory organs, fragile skin that provided almost no protection. From a biological perspective, they were not impressive. But was not here to study biology. They were here to study innovation. The first human interviewed was a station maintenance worker named. She was an older woman with hair and rough hands. When asked about the tool she was using to repair a ventilation system, explained that she had built it herself. The tool was not standard equipment. It was something had put together from parts she found around the station. She had noticed that the official repair tools did not work well in certain conditions, so she made her own. This took her about 3 evenings and cost her nothing but time. Examine the tool carefully. It was crude in appearance but remarkably effective. The design showed understanding of fluid dynamics, structural engineering, and material science. When asked where she had studied these subjects, she laughed. "I didn't study them anywhere," she said. "I just watched some videos and figured it out." Videos made a note to investigate what this meant. Over the following weeks, the analyst encountered this pattern repeatedly. Humans learned from each other through informal channels. They shared knowledge freely, without concern for credentials or qualifications. Anyone could access information about almost any subject. Anyone could try to solve almost any problem. This was not how other civilizations worked. Among the only licensed engineers could access engineering data. The Crystalline Collective restricted scientific knowledge to their academic caste. Every advanced species the Commission had studied protected their intellectual resources behind walls of certification and credential. Humans had no walls. Or rather, the walls they had were full of holes, and the humans seemed to enjoy finding ways through them. Visited what the humans called a maker space. It was a large room filled with tools and materials and machines. People of all ages worked on projects there. An elderly man was building a small robot. A young woman was experimenting with chemical compounds. 2 teenagers were trying to construct a device that could generate small amounts of electrical power from body heat. None of these people were professionals. They had regular jobs doing other things. This was how they spent their free time. They made things. They experimented. They tried to solve problems that interested them. The analyst watched the teenagers work on their power generation device. They had failed many times. Their current prototype barely worked, but they kept trying new approaches, testing different materials, measuring results, and making adjustments. When asked them why they were working on this project, one of the teenagers looked confused by the question. "Because it would be cool if it worked," she said. Cool added this term to their growing vocabulary of human motivation. By the end of their first month on Station Harmony, had collected enough data to form a preliminary hypothesis. The analyst composed a report to the Commission and transmitted it back to the archive station. The response came within hours. The review board demanded clarification. The findings could not be correct, must have made errors in their observations. The patterns they described were impossible according to 11,000 years of technological development theory. Read the response carefully. Their compound eyes tracked each line of criticism. The board was wrong, and they would prove it. They requested permission to extend their investigation and expand their scope. Permission was granted, though reluctantly. The analyst left Station Harmony and traveled to Earth's surface. If they wanted to understand how human amateurs solved professional problems, they needed to see where this strange phenomenon had originated. They needed to witness the chaos at its source. Had no idea how much chaos awaited them. Part 2. Landed on Earth in a region called the Pacific Northwest. Rain fell constantly from skies. Trees grew so tall they blocked out the light. The analyst found the climate unpleasant, but they were not here for comfort. They were here for answers. The first community studied called themselves the Open Hardware Collective. They met in a large building that had once been a factory for making ground vehicles. Now it was filled with workbenches, machines, and humans working on projects that ranged from simple tools to complex devices that the analyst could not immediately identify. Introduced themselves as a researcher studying human innovation patterns. The humans seemed delighted to have an alien visitor. They gave a tour of the facility and explained their various projects with obvious enthusiasm. One project immediately caught the analyst's attention. A team of 5 humans was building a fusion reactor. Stopped walking and stared at the device taking shape on the workshop floor. Fusion power was considered an advanced technology, something that most civilizations achieved only after centuries of dedicated research by their most qualified scientists. These humans were building one in what they cheerfully called their spare time. "We've been working on this for about 2 years," explained a woman named Maria. She was the group's unofficial leader, though she insisted they did not have formal roles. "We're not there yet, but we're getting close." The analyst examined the reactor's design. It was unconventional. The approach was different from anything in the Commission's archives. When asked Maria where she had trained as a fusion physicist, she laughed. "I'm not a physicist," she said. "I'm a plumber. Well, retired plumber, but pipes are pipes, right? Whether they carry water or plasma, the principles are similar." Did not think the principles were similar at all, but they made a note of Maria's statement anyway. The other team members had equally unlikely backgrounds. There was a former restaurant cook who handled the team's computational modeling. A schoolteacher managed their material sourcing. 2 siblings who had previously worked in construction dealt with the physical assembly. None of them had formal training in nuclear physics or plasma engineering or any of the dozen other fields that fusion research required. Yet somehow they were making progress. Their reactor design addressed several problems that had troubled professional researchers for years. When asked how they had solved these problems, the team members shrugged and said they had tried different things until something worked. This answer did not satisfy the analyst. Trying different things was not a methodology. It was not systematic. It was the opposite of how proper research was conducted. Yet here was the evidence, sitting on the workshop floor. These amateurs were succeeding where many professionals had failed. Spent several weeks with the Open Hardware Collective. They documented dozens of projects and interviewed hundreds of participants. A clear pattern emerged. The humans shared information freely. They collaborated across what other species would consider strict professional boundaries. They combined knowledge from unrelated fields in ways that should not work but often did. The analyst's second report to the Commission introduced a troubling hypothesis. Human amateurs succeeded precisely because they lacked professional training. They did not know which approaches had already failed. They were unburdened by theoretical frameworks that defined what solutions should look like. Their ignorance was not a weakness. It was a freedom. The Commission's review board rejected this hypothesis. Ignorance could not be an advantage. Training and expertise existed for good reasons. The humans must have hidden educational systems that the analyst had failed to detect. Knew this was wrong, but they needed more evidence. They traveled next to a smaller community in what the humans called the Midwest. Here they met a woman named, 73 years old, who had spent most of her life working in food service. After retirement, had become interested in material science. This interest had begun simply enough. Wanted to fix a cooking pot that had developed a crack. Rather than buying a new pot, she decided to learn how to repair metal. One repair led to another. She began reading about metallurgy. Then she started experimenting with different alloys in her garage. now 15 years later, held 17 patents for materials that were used in spacecraft construction, medical devices, and industrial equipment. Her discoveries had earned her millions of credits, which she donated to local schools and community programs. 3 universities had offered her honorary degrees. She had declined them all. "I don't need a degree," told over a cup of the hot brown liquid that humans called coffee. "I just like figuring things out." Asked how she had solved the thermal resistance problem that had stumped materials scientists for 2 decades. Her answer disturbed the analyst more than any previous data point. "I didn't know it was supposed to be hard," said. "Nobody told me that smart people had already tried everything, so I just tried some things that seemed obvious to me." The things that seemed obvious to had not seemed obvious to anyone else. She had approached the problem from a completely different direction than the professional researchers. Her background in food service had given her insights into temperature management that the scientists lacked. Her lack of formal training meant she did not know which approaches were considered impossible. She simply tried them anyway. Documented methodology carefully. The analyst was beginning to understand something about humans that challenged everything the commission believed. Professional expertise was valuable. Training and education provided important foundations, but they also created limitations. Experts knew what had been tried before. They knew what had failed. They knew which approaches were considered promising and which were considered dead ends. This knowledge guided their work. It made them efficient. It prevented them from wasting time on approaches that others had already proven unworkable. But it also trapped them. Experts operated within invisible boundaries defined by their training. They did not question certain assumptions because those assumptions were fundamental to their fields. They did not try certain approaches because everyone knew those approaches did not work. Amateurs had no such limitations. They questioned everything because they did not know what questions were considered settled. They tried everything because they did not know what approaches were considered impossible. Most of the time, this led to failure. Amateurs usually could not match the achievements of trained professionals, but occasionally, rarely, they stumbled upon solutions that no expert would ever find. They succeeded precisely because they did not know they were supposed to fail. Transmitted their third report to the commission. This one included the case study and several similar examples. The analyst's hypothesis was becoming clearer. Human civilization had accidentally created a massive parallel innovation infrastructure. Their amateur communities functioned as a testing ground for unconventional approaches that professional institutions would never attempt. The commission's response was cold. The review board acknowledged the data but questioned the analyst's interpretation. They demanded that find an alternative explanation. The hypothesis that ignorance could be advantageous was simply too disturbing to accept. Decided to conduct one final investigation. If the commission wanted proof, they would provide it. The analysts searched human networks for the most extreme example they could find. They were looking for a case so clear, so undeniable, that even the review board would be forced to accept the truth. They found it on a planet called Mars, in a habitat dome called New Tucson, in a classroom full of children. Part 3. The science fair at New Tucson Primary School was a modest event. 23 students, ages 9 to 12, presented projects they had completed over the past semester. Their parents stood nearby, offering encouragement. Teachers moved between displays, asking questions and making notes on their evaluation forms. Arrived with special permission from Earth's government. The manted analyst attracted considerable attention. Several children abandoned their projects temporarily to ask questions about their segmented body, compound eyes, and the strange clicking sounds their translator device made. The analyst answered their questions patiently. Humans, they had learned, appreciated patience with their young. It built trust with the adults. eventually made their way through the displays. Most projects were what they expected. A child had grown plants under different colored lights. Another had built a model of the solar system. A third had tested which materials made the best insulators. Then reached the display at the far end of the room. A girl named Maya, 11 years old, stood beside a poster covered in mathematical equations. Her project was titled, "A Fun Way to Think About Spinning Things." The analysts studied the equations. At first, they did not understand what they were seeing. The notation was unusual. Maya had invented her own symbols because she did not know the standard ones. Had to ask her to explain what each symbol meant. As Maya explained her work, the analyst's crystal-like compound eyes widened. A cold sensation spread through their segmented body. For the first time in their long career, felt something close to fear. Maya had solved the rotation problem. This was not possible. The rotation problem was a mathematical puzzle that had troubled physicists across 17 civilizations for over 8,000 years. It described certain behaviors of rotating objects in curved spacetime. The mathematics involved were considered so complex that most species did not even teach them outside advanced graduate programs. 3 of those 17 civilizations had officially declared the problem fundamentally intractable. Their greatest minds had proven, through rigorous logical demonstration, that no solution could exist. The Commission had classified it as a closed question. There was no point in further research. Maya had solved it with colored pencils and a notebook decorated with cartoon cats. "I didn't know it was a real problem," she told when they asked how she had approached it. "My dad was watching a video about physics, and they mentioned something about spinning things being weird in space. I thought it sounded like a fun puzzle." A fun puzzle. Translator device clicked rapidly as they struggled to process this statement. Maya had approached the problem as a game. She had not known about the thousands of years of failed attempts. She had not read the papers proving that no solution existed. She had simply started playing with the numbers and shapes until she found a pattern that made sense to her. Her solution was unconventional. It used approaches that would never occur to a trained physicist. It combined concepts from fields that experts considered completely unrelated. The mathematics was messy and informal, but when worked through it carefully, they found no errors. The child had done what 17 civilizations could not. Requested permission to record Maya's work in detail. They spent 3 hours at her display, asking questions and making notes. The girl's parents watched nervously, unsure whether to be proud or concerned that an alien researcher was so interested in their daughter's science fair project. That evening, transmitted their final report to the Commission. They included complete documentation of Maya's solution through the analyst's own calculations. They requested immediate review by the Commission's mathematical experts. The response came the next morning. The review board was in chaos. Maya's solution was correct. The rotation problem had been solved by an 11-year-old human who thought it was a fun puzzle. 17 civilizations had worked on this problem for. Professional mathematicians across the galaxy had devoted their entire careers to it, and a child had solved it by accident, on a project she completed in 3 weeks. The Commission demanded that bring Maya to the archive station for further study. They wanted to test her. They wanted to understand how her mind worked. Perhaps she was a unique individual, a prodigy whose abilities could not be replicated. Refused the demand. They had come to understand something important about humans, and taking Maya away from her home and school would not help anyone understand it better. Maya was not special, or rather, she was not uniquely special. She was special in the same way that the retired food service worker was special. She was special in the same way that Maria, the plumber building a fusion reactor, was special. She was special in the same way that thousands of human amateurs solving professional problems were special. What made Maya different was not superior intelligence or unusual ability. It was the absence of limitations that would have prevented her from trying. No one had told Maya that the problem was impossible. No one had taught her which approaches had already failed. No one had trained her to think within the boundaries that defined professional physics. She had looked at a puzzle, found it interesting, and worked on it until she solved it. This was what humans did. This was the secret that the Commission had failed to understand through 11,000 years of studying civilizations. Most species treated their professional classes as the source of innovation. They trained their minds in established methods. They taught them what was known and what was possible. They built institutions to support and fund and guide research along productive paths. All of this was valuable. All of this produced real advances. But it also created invisible walls. It told people what questions were worth asking. It told them what approaches were worth trying. It told them what was possible and what was not. Humans built those walls too, but they also built doors and windows and holes, and they seemed to enjoy finding ways around them. Their amateur communities were not a flaw in their civilization's development. They were a feature. By allowing untrained individuals to tackle professional problems, humans maintained a constant supply of fresh perspectives. Most amateurs failed. Most unconventional approaches led nowhere. But the few that succeeded often achieved breakthroughs that no expert would ever find. His final recommendation to the Commission was simple. Stop trying to predict human technological development. Their path could not be modeled because it did not follow any path at all. Their innovation came from everywhere, from anyone, at any time. There was no pattern to analyze because the absence of pattern was itself the pattern. Commissioner Al reviewed the recommendation. Their crystalline form shifted through colors that the Commission's staff had never seen before. The report was disturbing. It challenged everything the Commission believed about how civilizations grew and developed. But it was also undeniable. The evidence was clear. Humans were not like other species. They could not be predicted, categorized, or contained within the Commission's existing models. The Commission voted to classify humanity as a category Omega developmental anomaly. This was a new classification, created specifically for species whose technological trajectory analysis. It meant that humans would be watched closely but not predicted. Their future achievements would be recorded but not anticipated. Some members of the Commission found this conclusion unsatisfying. They wanted answers. They wanted models and predictions and understanding. They had spent 11,000 cycles believing that technological development followed universal laws. Humans had proven them wrong. Who had grown fond of the strange soft creatures during their time on Earth and Mars, submitted a personal addendum to their final report. Perhaps, they suggested, the Commission had been studying innovation wrong all along. Perhaps the other civilizations had been doing it wrong too. Perhaps the walls that protected professional expertise also limited what that expertise could achieve. Perhaps the humans, with their chaotic amateur communities and their children solving impossible problems for fun, had accidentally discovered something that older and wiser species had missed. The motion to reconsider 11,000 cycles of methodology was put to a vote. It failed by a narrow margin. The Commission was not ready to question its fundamental assumptions. But notice that several commissioners who voted against the motion requested copies of Maya's solution afterward. They wanted to see how an 11-year-old human had done what their entire civilization could not. Perhaps they were curious. Perhaps they thought it would be fun to look at the puzzle from a different angle. Perhaps thought the humans were already changing how other species approached problems, not through teaching or demonstration, but simply by example, by showing that the walls everyone believed in were not as solid as they seemed. The analysts returned to their quarters and began writing a new research proposal. They wanted to study how human amateur innovation patterns might be introduced to other civilizations. It was an ambitious project. It would probably fail. But had learned something from the humans. Sometimes the most productive approach was to try things that seemed unlikely to work. Sometimes ignorance was not a weakness but a freedom. Sometimes the most important discoveries came from those who did not know they were supposed to fail.